And we'll give that a second to get started. Hey there, Michael Hart. Good to see you in chat. Barry, you got the whole crew here. Hey, David. Looking really good. We're going to wait another few seconds to go ahead and make sure everything is getting started and in the right place. Very good. Give us just another few seconds. Let some more people pop into the room here.
Yeah.
Hello, 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 Carolyn. Let us see. Looking great. Okay. So many windows. I think we have everything going. All right. We have Grayson chiming in from backstage here.
Excellent.
Looking good. All right. Tom, why don't we go ahead and get started? I think everything is doing what we need it to do.
All right.
And for everyone here, if you have any specific questions, you can use the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen. That's the best way to ask a question of not only me or Tom, but some of our other special guests here tonight. And we're very excited to have you here today. This is another event in ASMP's 80th anniversary, and it's an opportunity for us to go back in time a little bit when Tom Kennedy here was the executive director of ASMP. And I'll start with a little history and a little bit of a story before I get into some announcements, and then we'll get into it. But I remember graduating from law school. I'd been an ASMP member for a long time, but I had moved on to my career in law. And the way that I got involved with being part of ASMP was by writing a letter. And at the time, I didn't know Tom, and I wrote a letter to Tom Kennedy. And essentially, the letter said, "Hey, I'm a new lawyer. I'd really love to work with you all. I, was a photographer before I became a lawyer." And Tom wrote back, and Tom said, "You know what? That's some impeccable timing because at the moment I'm in need of a lawyer." And so that started the relationship where I got to work with Tom for many, many years. And we got to do some incredible things together, a lot of which we're going to talk about today. Definitely want to welcome everyone who's not only here in the webinar, but on the live streams that are going on LinkedIn and Facebook and primarily YouTube. And if you haven't been following the ASMP National channel on YouTube, I encourage you to. I wish you would, because that's where you're going to find a lot of our latest videos and some things we're going to talk about today as well. So, Tom, I'm going to say welcome, but then I'm going to immediately cut you off and jump to a few announcements before we get into the meat of this thing.
Sounds good, Tom.
Perfect. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, and hopefully everyone can see that. And if you can't see it, just yell at your computer, and I'm sure I will hear you at some point. This is our 80th anniversary, and as part of that, we have been going for the last 8 weeks, focusing very much on the events that are coming up. This is, I believe, our 5th event in the series of 8 events. And you want to, if you haven't had a chance to check out the videos of some of the virtual events we've done, we definitely encourage you to do that. There's a whole website that we're about to look at over at asmp80th.org. And we're going to look a little bit at some of the events that have taken place and some of them that are just coming up, including one that was announced just today. And if you haven't entered to be part of our giveaways, you really should, because it's not just giveaways for what's going on right now. It's giveaways for the whole 80th anniversary. You can enter once a day. I'm going to show you how to do that and where to do that. But feel free to grab that QR code, and we want you to enter. In week one, we gave away a Profoto A10 flash at, $1,200. We've given away $1,000 Westcott lighting gear. We've given away a lot of 80th anniversary merch, and we have a lot more stuff that we're giving away during the 80th anniversary in the next couple weeks. And we're only giving it away, though, if you enter, because we won't know that you want it unless you enter. So please go there, go to our giveaways panel, and enter. You can enter, again, every single day. You can do a few other activities, but you don't have to. You can just simply put your name and your email, and you'll be entered for all the giveaways that we do through December 5th. We would love you to do that. So we started the 80th anniversary up in Chicago with an in-person workshop with Stephen Carlish, which was about lighting spaces and an editorial portrait. And we had a number of our 80th anniversary title sponsors with us, like Profoto and Sony. It was a really amazing event, a really fun day of shooting and taking a look at things in the archives and talking about ASMP, and half-day workshop, really a blast. The next week, we came back and we did an event with Scott Burrows here online about this current state of copyright in the U.S. Supreme Court, talking about AI, talking about a lot of other things. You can go see that on our YouTube channel or on the 80th anniversary site. Then we had just a blockbuster panel that occurred a couple weeks ago, led by Karen Williams, moderated by Karen Williams, with a plethora of incredible art directors and creatives, and just so many people who know what's going on in the industry right now. Really great conversation. Again, you can look at that. You can look at that recording over at YouTube. Last week was NAMPA week here during our 80th anniversary, and we announced many of the winners of the NAMPA Showcase competition that occurs each and every year. And so we got to talk about that and talk about some of the things that we get to do over on the NAMPA side, including some advocacy work where we work on things like the Film Act, which particularly impacts not only ASMP photographers, but NAMPA photographers as well. And this one is what's coming up next week, and this was just announced. Next Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern, so the same time, but on Wednesday, we're having a one-on-one conversation with Santiago Leon, who has accolades a mile long, but was the former global director of photography for AP, among other things, and is now the head of advocacy and education for the Content Authenticity Initiative, pretty much the primary group that is focused on authenticity in the age of AI and implementing the processes and the underpinnings that combat misinformation, make sure that people know what's authentic, what's created by AI, and everything in between. It's going to be an incredibly valuable conversation. I'm really looking forward to this. Santiago is in that handful of people at the intersection of AI and photography, and you will not want to miss that. Again, it is free. It is a webinar next Wednesday night at 6 p.m., so please go and join. And then, if you're anywhere near the Connecticut area on Monday the 17th, you'll want to get your ticket for the Art of the SNL portrait with Mary Ellen Matthews. Mary Ellen Matthews has been the photographer for SNL for over 25 years. And, so she's photographed there when she's an incredible photographer herself. She's coming up to Hartford, Connecticut for a small group talk and book signing. She'll be bringing copies of her book, The Art of the SNL Portrait. Really looking forward to that one. Of course, just like our other in-person events, we're going to have some things from the archives. We're going to have a lot of 80th anniversary giveaways that we have going on. We're excited for this one as well. That is our 7th event of the session, which means there's one more event and that's coming very, very soon. The details are going to be announced shortly. Um, our December 5th event is going to be taking place in New York City. And that is going to happen on Friday, the evening of Friday, December 5th. The location, all the details, registration is going to be posted next week. So please stay tuned for that. And that will be the 8th of our events we're going out with a bang there in New York. If you're anywhere near the area, we would love for you to come in. You know, one of the things that we'll mention is about how ASMP works for the community and works for the industry and works for its members. And as Tom and I will discuss, obviously one of the most challenging things for this industry and for so many photographers was the pandemic. And during the pandemic, the ASMP Foundation played a wonderful role by offering micro grants to more than 100 of our members who were in need at that time. Um, you are able to donate to the ASMP Foundation for that tax deduction, for that write-off, and support ASMP and the 501c3 work that it does. So please do. You can text ASMP 80 to 707070. You can go to that QR code. Either one of those will get you there. So I want to go ahead and jump into the conversation with Tom, and see, you know, Tom, it's so great to see you, and you and I have been able to keep in touch and talk over the years. But I got to ask this: have you had time to decompress from your time as executive director at ASMP? Tell us what you've been up to and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I have actually begun to decompress, as you suggest. The last few years have been very interesting. I've been heavily involved with some activities with my church, and actually wound up serving 3 years on the vestry, which is what you might call the civilian organizing body that governs church activities. I'm Episcopalian, and so this is an Episcopal church. And I've also been involved with a number of different groups advocating on both the state and federal level, continuing to do the work that I began at ASMP, and you know, obviously working on the side of pro-democracy groups, particularly, for example, Moms Demand Action, and have been lobbying, or advocating, I guess is a better word, not lobbying, but doing the same kind of things that I was doing when I was at ASMP.
Well, I know so many people here know you, Tom, but for those who might not, can you tell us a little bit about what led you to ASMP, what you were doing before, and then tell us a little bit about your time when you first started?
Sure. I had been, first I was, for a very long time, I was a newspaper photographer and then a newspaper photo editor. And in the in 1985, I moved to National Geographic as their assistant director of photography. And I spent 11 years there and became director of photography about a year and a half after arriving. And then in 1990, at the end of 1997, I had seen the dawning of the internet a few years earlier and was realizing that I needed to play a role, or felt like I needed to play a role, in how that might evolve in terms of the presentation of photojournalism. So I moved to the Washington Post and then headed up their multimedia operation for 11 years. And, so I was actually working primarily as an educator, doing some adjunct teaching when I first got a call from the ASMP in the spring of 2014, asking if I'd be heading up a search committee to look for their next executive director. At that point, the board had decided that they would like to have a new executive director. And so I began working with them on that search process. And somewhere along the line, they and I had a Dick Cheney moment where they asked me if I would consider applying myself. And I said that was an unlikely scenario, but I'd go ahead and give it a try. And, as they say, the rest was history, and I was offered the position at the end of 2014 and began it in January 2015.
Well, I think it was uh, about the end of 2015, early 2016, when you and I first started working together. And I think it's fair to say at that point, I was still kind of looking at ASMP from afar. ASMP was one of the clients that my law firm worked with, but it was a challenging situation when you came in. And I often think about your time at ASMP starting off pretty challenging, stepping into the role, and then ending up pretty challenging because you ended right in the middle of the pandemic, right?
Very much so.
So, what, as you reflect and look back on your time at ASMP, what were the most challenging aspects of the position?
I think that the challenging thing was really recognizing how much the organization, how it needed to exist to serve the members, and recognizing that we were going through a really challenging period financially that I encountered going into my position, and that my job was basically to ensure that the organization survived so it could continue to service the members while navigating the finances in a way that allowed us to begin to, continue to build on the services that we were offering members so that they would see themselves as, so that individual photographers would see themselves recognizing our value proposition and that they would continue to support us and indeed that we could enlarge the membership along the way so that we could be the force that I think ASMP has always been for the industry.
It's one of those things that I think, Tom, you and I have had a lot of conversations about. Just when you're in an organization that's been around for 80 years, there are ebbs and flows to the world around the organization and to the organization itself. And it's very much a situation that you walked into that was not a foregone conclusion about the future of ASMP. And thought you did an incredible job trying to steady a ship that in a lot of ways was tricky. It was tricky to handle. Um, I say this with all the humility in the world because it matters each and every time I hear it. But um, almost every week I hear from a member, and whether they remain members or they were past members, who watched our town halls during the pandemic and were able to connect with each other, connect with us, and get some information that they needed. Um, you know, I always thought that was an example of, and maybe the best example since I've been involved with ASMP of ASMP at its best. What do you recall from those times and what not only the world was facing, but what we were trying to do at ASMP?
Well, the thing that probably sticks out most vividly to me was just recognizing the fear that was in the air at that moment, both literally because nobody knew really the remedies for the virus that would ultimately prove effective and how quickly people could be vaccinated in a way that would make their health less at risk. And then recognizing that it was building on creating an incredible disruption for the industry that would impact every photographer who was a professional trying to make a living. And I would say, thinking about it, Tom, going back to even earlier, when I walked into my role as executive director, the industry was really changing in ways that they were obvious, but they weren't. And I know that sounds a little bit weird, but the demise of the publication industry had already begun, and the disruptive impacts of the internet were really beginning to be felt in a way that meant that the pillars of support that the publications industry, particularly, and even advertising to some degree, had previously offered photographers in an earlier generation for ASMP members, those were beginning to decline so precipitously that they couldn't be depended on as sources of work and revenue in the future for individual photographers. And I would say that that reality was exacerbated by the arrival of the pandemic and the threat that it posed to further accelerating that kind of damage. So I felt like it was really essential to do what we did, which was to try to figure out what kind of information we could provide in the moment that would be of use to members trying to navigate these kind of dual realities. And, I
Right.
would say, that in addition to some of the advocacy work that I know we're going to talk about, were probably two of the major highlights of my tenure at the ASMP helm.
You know, you talk a little bit about what ASMP was able to do during that time of transition, and it feels like certainly for the last couple decades we've always been in some kind of time of transition with the transition to digital, the transition as you're talking about the demise of publications and the pandemic, and now we're facing new existential threats with AI and other issues that directly affect the membership. What do you view as ASMP's role now in this world and in this industry?
Well, that's a great question, and it's not an easy one necessarily to answer. I think obviously we need to continue to provide the information that allows photographers to develop and hone their own skills in a way that enables them to be seen as providing something of value to potential clients. And that's probably one of the most crucial aspects. I think the other thing is obviously to continue to be a beacon advocating for photographers' rights as creators and recognizing things that might be impinging or impacting that in a negative way and countering those to the degree possible. And then finally, I think I am, like you, very concerned about the implications of AI in a variety of ways. And I would expect that ASMP would play a very important role in helping to establish the ethical guidelines and ethical guardrails that would enable people to be cognizant of what's real and truthful in photography going forward, particularly in the areas of editorial photography and photojournalism. I think that there's a real need for people to develop a sense of media literacy that allows them to move past the fire hose of misinformation and disinformation, which is often spread, particularly by the internet. And we need to, the ASMP needs to play a role in helping people attain that kind of media literacy. And I could see
Yeah.
that being very much a role for ASMP.
Well, and there are always so many things, and we talk about this, as you know, Tom. This is the conversation topic that we've had for many years now, a decade, I guess, now, which is, ASMP is involved with and does a number of things that kind of fly under the radar a little bit, and it's one of those great little joys that I get to have when we are able to stand up or sign on to a letter or take a position or help a member. Sometimes that are in a lot of ways just a very small corner of all the troubles that are facing the industry and facing the membership. But each one of those victories is an important one, right?
I agree. I agree
Yeah.
completely. Yeah.
You know, what as you look back the whole time, you were here at ASMP, what's your takeaway, both positive, negative? I mean, where do you feel how do you view your time here?
Well, I think it was obviously a time of challenge and to a degree transition for the organization. But I guess I feel best that I helped it survive, and that you continue to exist today. And in fact, you're thriving in a way that was probably not certain, when I undertook the assignment to become executive director, particularly as I discovered things in the early, months of my tenure that were challenging and alarming at the same time. And so, it's funny, kind of to digress for a second. I was aware of the ASMP from the time that I was a student in the late 1960s. And, many of my heroes in the photography world at that time were ASMP members whose work was regularly shown in various photographic publications, like particularly Popular Photography and Modern Photography, which were the two main ones at the time. And about a decade later, as I was really seriously entering the profession, but still a newspaper photographer, I made a trip to New York and did some interviewing just to try to get a feel for what it would take to become a freelancer if I ever wanted to go that route. And I discovered that my uncle was actually in the process of negotiating a contract to begin to do the ASMP annuals, which was a rival to the Creative Black Book at the time. And so his publishing company produced the annuals for several years. So in a weird way, I felt like my tenure as the executive director was honoring my uncle's earlier involvement, and sort of like the ASMP was a family business in a way. So, you know,
Well, those there are all those little ties. I remember you and I talking about that, a while ago. And that's one of the things about an organization that's had this type of longevity, is that there's so many, different facets of ways it works into your life. And I always think about, I remember the chair I was sitting in when my 11th grade photography instructor first mentioned ASMP to me, and I first joined as a student. And it's, we're able to, in the context of an 80-year-old organization, literally have a full lifetime of experience
yeah,
with this organization. And someone we're going to talk to in a second has had literally a full lifetime of experience. And that kind of leads into, before we invite him out, I want to say that, we're going to talk a little bit about our archives here for a second. Tom, you and I have spent hours and days in the ASMP archives. What's your favorite part of the legacy and the history of ASMP?
I think it's just realizing when we look particularly at the archives and see some of the various forms of correspondence as well as the photography itself. I am struck by it, just makes very vivid and real the reality of people that I considered, my personal heroes in photography, and people that I was trying to learn from and grow from being exposed to. And I guess my favorite part of the archives was just really looking at kind of the way that they saw the world, the things that they had as challenges in the particular moments that where they were, obviously working as either on the board or, central crucial members who were really highly involved in trying to get various programs initiated and undertaken. And it makes me realize that the history of a certain kind of photography in the 20th century almost entirely resides in these archives. And that's what I think makes them so valuable, and what my one of my major aspirations walking away as executive director would be to see that somebody someday would enter into those archives and utilize them to create the definitive written history of the ASMP, because I think it's a history that's worth celebrating and acknowledging. And I don't think we would have had the history, frankly, of publication in the United States in the 20th century that we had without the ASMP and its support for the photographic community.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, especially, ever since we started working together and all through my time working with Jim Daytree, the there's always been a focus on finding the right home for the ASMP archives, and that's not a small undertaking because we have a pretty incredible archive here. And we now get to hear from someone who, Tom, I think you and I have talked to for quite a long time, and that is the archivist and historian for ASMP, Grayson Dantzic. Grayson, and we'll invite Grayson out now. Grayson is also on the board of the New York chapter and on the board of different archives groups. And above all, and I think you will find this whether you already know Grayson or you are hearing from him for the first time. There is no one in this world more passionate about the ASMP archives than Grayson. And Grayson gets to take the spotlight here for the next half hour or so and show some incredible things from the archives, many of which I am sure you haven't seen. So Grayson, we'll turn it over to you for a minute. Tell us a little bit about what's going on. Welcome.
Well, it's such an honor and privilege to be here and serve the great cause. My double Toms. I mean, I was buzzing around Tom Kennedy for years, and I remember one day he just looked at me and he goes, "Let's do it." And then next thing I knew, ticket to Kensington, and we were digging out from the very first start. And he's my brother in arms since we met. We put in major days. I know Tom, Maddrey, you came down there, and we were just discovering greatness every place we looked. And it's unfortunate we don't have more time to get down there, but the dream is so much alive to discover, protect, and then make available the incredible resources of history since 1944 that no other organization can even, step up to, because there is, like I said in the little video, ain't nobody else. It's sort of a catchphrase, but it's sort of the truth. And I feel so honored, obviously, because I'm walking in my father's footsteps since he joined in '56 as well. So there's a personal aspect, which I really enjoy as well, as much as the history of photography that I always talk about. I'm happy to jump right in if you want me to. I mean, that's what I do. All right,
jump in.
All right, here we go. Let's see what I got here. I got my, am I there? Wait, where am I? Where is it? One second. I was there a second ago. Hold on one second. Keynote. All right. And one sec. All right. We're sharing. We're in. I'm there. I'm up to the top. I'm here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. 80 years since 1944, the premier photographic organization for photographers' rights has been ASMP, starting as an idea that the most amazing gentleman who I never get to meet is John Adam Knight, who was our spiritual founding father, who in the early 40s got together and convinced Ike Verne and Bradley Smith, two early members, to form an organization to protect photographers. And so anyway, let me just get into some of this, because these are just a smidgen, just a tease, as you will. But here we have a letter from 1947 written by Edward Weston, who was 2 years into his suffering with Parkinson's, and he didn't live very much. He lived only until 58. So but what I love about this, as a fellow photographer, he's saying black and white is still my real love, which is just the most amazing thing to hear from one of the masters. And he was an honorable member, and he says he hopes to be more than just a figurehead. But you could tell he was struggling, and we're so lucky to have a decent file of his work in the archives. And I was just really excited. What I did was a little research, and I found out that he had a major retrospective in '46 at MoMA. He was selling prints at $25 a piece. He ended up selling almost 100 of them. And $25 at that time would have gotten you a membership at ASMP. Just a little fun fact for you. And if you go to the MoMA.org website, they have the entire Weston exhibition. So it's amazing what goes on. I'm just going to keep rolling here because there's just so much stuff. And if anybody has a question, feel free in real time to just shout it out in the chat. This is Infinity Magazine. When it was just changing direction, it had been the ASMP News, and then it was transitioning. There was a competition to get the logo, and so here was this magazine, and I will quote from page 4 in there. There's another way of saying infinity. The infinity mark on the camera is the point beyond which you cannot focus. It means your field of vision is not narrowly limited, but free and unrestricted. The infinity symbol means unlimited horizons. You know what I'm saying? Unlimited.
I like that. I like that.
And this was, the infinity symbol is the winning name, and it was fitting that Myron Davis, a longtime ASMP member from Chicago, I know we just did a big program in Chicago, submitted the entry. It was designed by a guy from Fortune magazine, and the cover photograph is by Ronnie Jacques, who is ASMP member 179. He joined in 1946. He was ASMP's first vice president from 1949 to 1950, and Ronnie Jacques was proposed by Eugene Smith and Mark Shaw. But what we're looking at in this photograph is 2 children from a collection of photos that were taken by Ronnie Jacques in Dublin, Ireland. And he was featured as the month's favorite unpublished photographer. So pretty amazing stuff. But I love logos, and one of the things I'm trying to do for the 80th is gather together all the logos through the years. Well, here's an amazing moment for me. Jay, I hope you're out there. I did invite my dear friend Jay Maisel, who is in legacy terms ASMP royalty. He's a father figure to me, and was a friend of my father, Jerry Dantzic, and went to Yale with my mother, Cynthia. But here he is, ASMP member 1955. He's member number 553, and proposed by none other than Gary Winogrand and Marty Dane. Amazing. I looked in the bottom there, and it says, what are his specializations? And among them are documentary, reportage, jazz, structures, and portraits. Amazing. And he's back in Brooklyn after all these years. You know, he was at the bank for, so long. We had our 60th anniversary party at Jay's bank, but he's back in Brooklyn now. And there, I was just looking at that.
Well, and Grayson,
please.
that brings up an interesting point. One of the things that I was blown away with when I first saw the ASMP archives was exactly what we're looking at, which is the handwritten application since 1944 of thousands of photographers, many of whom we'd be familiar with their names. And that's really one of the most unique pieces of the archive, isn't it? The member files and the applications.
Well, the thing that comes through so strongly, as we all know, the humanity back and forth. It just and as we go toward the threat of AI and the lack of humanity there, all we can do is embrace the full humanity that really is the foundational core of what ASMP means and means to me. It's the connective tissue, certainly to all of our heroes, the women and men who have inspired us and continue to, on the shoulders of giants, we continue to go forward. Speaking of one of those, here's Dorothea Lange. Okay, I mean, it's just amazing. Now, for me, this is incredible because I just was on the phone this week with Wayne Miller's daughter, Jeanette, and she is going to be sending us some of Wayne Miller's papers. And he was in 54 and 55, he was president. And it's amazing because it just gives me the opportunity to say, out there in ASMP land, if you have ASMP files that you don't wish to hold on to anymore, we are more than happy to accommodate you and put them at home with all of the rest of the ASMP family where they rightly belong. And before I even got on the job, I noticed that other members were always donating things. Arthur Leipzig, for instance, donated all of his periodicals. And then I ended up buying a whole bunch of periodicals off the internet from Jim Felt out on the West Coast. But this is the most amazing thing for me, which is just connecting all the pieces of the puzzle. We'll look in the bottom there and we'll see received November 55. The KR is Kay Reese. Now, Kay Reese predates me as the primary archivist for the history of ASMP. She is pinnacle. Along with Mimi Leipzig, they ended up doing audio interviews with some of the ASMP legacy members, and we have access to them, and transcripts are actually online. But the journey that we are carrying forward, gentlemen, it began long before we did. And it's up to us to try to carry it forward to the finish line. That's really what we're talking about here. I'll continue on because I could just say too many things. So my dear friend Dorothy Davis, who's a friend of mine through the APAG, where I'm executive vice president with President Mary Engel of the American Photography Archives Group. So she comes to me and she's telling me all about her father, because she had a show of her father's at the Schomburg. Well, I said, but ASMP, amazing, Griff Davis, ASMP, along with Jackson here, who was David Jackson was a very noted photographer for Ebony magazine. So here they are with none other than Louis Jordan. Amazing situation here. And I love how it says also an amateur photographer, because, by the way, it's just amazing to learn through the ASMP files. Did everybody know that Sammy Davis Jr. was a photographer? Amazing.
And so, I saw this today, Grayson, when you had sent over, and I love that part of the caption that says, these are the gentlemen here celebrating upon their acceptance as members of ASMP, which is awesome. Just really cool to see.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that I like to do as far as advocacy, celebration of the history of the company, of the organization. I really want to show all the facets of ASMP, and I look at the camera.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. So this is it's a win-win, and I'm just so delighted. I also noted that when we were looking in the files, Ed Feingersh also joined. Ed Feingersh was noted for his work of Marilyn Monroe and all those things, but he was also a member along this time in '57. So it was just in good company, always. Just stepping a little bit from the 50s to the 60s, here we have a letter that was written by the president at that time, Ben Rose, who was president from 62 to 65. And really and truly what this says is the glorious response of the organization supporting the civil rights movement and stepping out from not just doing photography, but doing what's right. Again, talking about humanity, right? And speaking with a voice that was just so important in the 60s. We'll note August 63 is only a few months before November 63, and we know what happened there, unfortunately. So the timing of this letter, so important. I found out that his assistant to the president responded in early September, and they were said to all the members, "Thank you so much for your support. The president is honored." Not the only president who reached out. Just hold on. I'll share that with you in a bit. But it's just nice to have some support from up on high. Now, this one is this little personal thing. It's me. My father, the late great Jerry Dantzic, ASMP member 605, was the guest editor in December of '71, and he had a photo studio on 33rd and 3rd. Then here's my mother, Cynthia, holding me 4 years after my birth in '67. But what's interesting is as a guest editor, I noted that Dad included a portfolio of Bork White and of his dear friend Boris Kasoy down in Argentina. So it was connecting the dots in a major way. Also, another donation to the ASMP Archives, treasurer Henri Doman, who was a friend, and he gave me the family gave me 6 binders. We're just honored, and this is a letter from Cornell Kappa talking about Don McCullen as a 1975 ASMP award winner. And so this is, again, another snapshot of items that are coming in. The ASMP Archives is alive and breathing. We are breathing life into the past, toward the future, in the very present that we are living in. I am so honored to do this with you. Through the years, we've had many anniversaries. Now, this, of course, is the special bulletin from the 35th anniversary in '81. And you'll note, Rob Kappa, Karsh, Halsman, Maisel, Vanderzee, Eddie Adams, Dorothea Lange, etc. I mean, it's just Avedon's on there. So the history of photography, as we like to say. Now, Kay Reese, tipping the cap to Kay Reese. This is the cover of an ASMP bulletin on the 40th anniversary. And it talks about there, you'll see her charming memoir of the early days. Well, we have many pages. She has helped us lay out some of the skeleton groundwork to how we tell the story. And here is a receipt for Ike Verne, who was ASMP member number 2, because Halsman was number 1, baby. And this predates this is October 25, and we talk about, the incorporation of December 22, 1944. So that's how far we go back here. Just an amazing thing. Did I mention another president? Yes, I did. Your organization stands as an example of excellence for all those who aspire to write with light. I hear I hear a saxophone somewhere. I mean, it's just incredible. Unfortunately, due to the shutdown, I couldn't get the official letter. I'm waiting. This is in the 50th special bulletin. I've never seen an official, but this is a copy of the letter, and it's now 2 major presidents. Now, this is Halsman's amazing photograph from 1951. This is called Voluptuous Death. I learned that doing some research, and Halsman, our first and our third president, and did 100 life covers. I mean, what are you going to say? Dali with it's just incredible. And this was 2004, our celebration of our 60th anniversary. And Tom Kennedy, step up to the mic. This is during your tenure. This is 2018. This is when we did a reach out to membership to gather a lot of legacy, iconic, historic, significant, past, present, future visionaries. And look at those names. I mean, you just can't say it any louder. Each one of them, a lifetime, a legacy, and we're on the same team. It's incredible. So I'm just so proud to be a part of this. And there's a couple of friendly folks. A little flashback, just because I can do that, because I'm archivally yours. I had the camera set up, and so you gentlemen were deep in the archive there with me, and it's the Bat Cave, so maybe we won't reveal where it is, but it's in an undisclosed location where it's under secure 24-hour security guards.
It's great.
Vicious dog. Anyway, so this is as good as it gets for me, and I'm so grateful to be part of this incredible history. There's so much more to say. There's so much more that I want to share. And what I want to say also is, please reach out. Please consider looking into your files and seeing what you have that you would like to unburden yourself with, that would find a better home in our ASMP archives, because we are growing stronger every day, adding pieces and dreaming about where the final home will be for the incredible ASMP archives. It has been an honor to share this with you today. There's so much more. Any questions? I mean, I feel like I just want
to... before you go, Grayson, I want to go ahead and I'll share my screen now, and we'll take a look over at the mini site over at asmp80th.org. And a lot of facets to this, but one of them is the Archives tab. And if you haven't been here, I encourage you to go and check out the Archives tab. Many things that Grayson showed you today, and some others you haven't seen, including an amazing video that produced by Kevin Bruzy, our current ASMP National Board Chair, which is amazing, and featuring Grayson talking about the archives. But then below, we have a number of different things. I think we've mentioned things like Stanley Kubrick's application, which is so impressive. And the thing that I always thought about this, and I didn't realize this till this year when we were doing research, was his first feature film was in the early 50s, 51. And so at this time in 1949, he was entirely an editorial photographer at that time, and a member of ASMP, which I always found incredibly interesting.
It was a glorious show that they did. Sean Corcoran was the curator at the Museum of City of New York. They did all the look stories for Stanley Kubrick. So it was just he started as just a teenager, but obviously the vision was so strong, and then you could see that, you know, manifesting itself in those incredible movies. But yeah, there was an I mean, the work from the Look magazine collection, which is Library of Congress in the city of New York, amazing. Yeah, I highly
Well, now,
recommend.
Grayson, this is a recognizable name, isn't it? And one of our earliest
Oh,
members as well.
ASMP royalty, none other than Arnold Newman. Amazing. Yes, I mean, he was, as I was looking back during the 50th anniversary, which took place, the celebration in New Orleans, which Bill Clinton actually mentions. Arnold Newman was signing posters and books. He was holding court there in a major way, and yeah, he's just an amazing portraitist, and we have photographs from the Halsman archives in which it's pre-beard Arnold Newman. So it's amazing. Visionary.
Well, there are some really unique pieces here. We're going to continue to add more. We'll end on one that I think I've, ever since I saw it, I was floored by it, and it's this letter from Richard Avedon from 1960, which says he's delighted to recommend Diane Arbus and Alan Arbus for membership in ASMP, and that always made me smile. You know, that we'd have a letter like this, and Grayson, it's one of, I mean, literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of letters that we have from our members and
Oh
from
yeah.
so many in the archives. You know, and maybe, you know, I think we've talked about this, but when I talk about the archives, when we're out there talking to different institutions and other places, you know, it really is probably the single greatest unseen repository of photographic memorabilia in American history. Isn't that right?
100%. I mean, it speaks so loudly with the voices of the great ones, unvarnished truths, and the connective pieces that we have built upon, and the good fight that we are still fighting for the photographers' rights of the day, copyright, Bill of Rights, conscience. I mean, there are so many, so many ideas bubbling in my beautiful archivist head. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm just so excited as we build toward the end of the year and additional events. This is a lot of excitement and energy and enthusiasm that's real, and you can feel it. And yeah.
And if you are in the New York area on December 5th, and all that information will be coming out next week on how to join us for that evening, for that celebration, Grayson will be there. Pieces from the archives will be there, and we want to give a special shout out to Adobe tonight. When we spoke with Adobe a few months ago, they asked what they could be involved in with the 80th anniversary. And this came out of some conversations that Grayson and I had with some people from Adobe a few months ago in New York. And they have a passion for this photography history as well. And so when you go and see the archives in person at the December 5th event, or when you're looking online at what we're looking at, that is presented in conjunction with Adobe. We want to thank them for their support on that, for bringing this type of photographic history to as many people as possible. And Grayson, we want to thank you for your
Absolutely.
presentation.
An
And
honor and a privilege to serve the great ASMP.
Yeah, well, I thank you, Grayson, for your vision in leading us to recognize what we had.
Tom Kennedy, you believed
and
in me, sir. You
continuing to
brought
do
me
it.
in. You brought me in. I remember so many years
Yeah,
asking.
yeah.
Thank you for listening.
You
Amazing.
bet.
thank you, Grayson.
All right,
Thank
take
you.
care, gentlemen. To the future.
Bye. Well, Tom, really, the archives are something that it's hard to even, if you have even a passing interest in the history of photography, it's hard to be anything but overwhelmed when you're holding these files of Arnold Newman and Ansel Adams and Mary Ellen Mark and Diane Arbus, and so many great photographers, past and present. And the thing that I always like to remind our membership today is that this is the part of the organization that you're a part of. This is the same organization for the last 80 years, and you are the next step in that lineage of all the things that Grayson showed you and all the things you might see in the archives. But one thing about the archives, and there's a whole other part to the archives. And that part is the legal and advocacy history of ASMP, which of course I have a particular affinity for. I think it's fair to say that ASMP has been involved in almost every major court case in America that dealt with photography since 1944, either directly or indirectly. And we remain to one of the only groups that do that. We have written, and I've been fortunate enough to write now, I think, 6 or 7 amicus briefs for the US Supreme Court on photography and copyright related cases, but it goes straight to something that is at the heart of ASMP, and that's our advocacy work. I think a lot like you, Tom. Even when I stepped into this position just last year, I hadn't done a lot of that kind of advocacy work on Capitol Hill in person. Can you talk a little bit about your experience, starting to have those Hill meetings and what that whole process was like for you?
Yes, I mean, that was probably as I was grappling with the challenges of just helping the organization survive some financial challenges and begin to thrive again. Probably my favorite part was being on Capitol Hill and being able to act as an advocate, knowing that I was representing the hopes and dreams and some of the fears of, a legion of photographers, and that it would be very difficult for any one of them to individually influence the course of legislation that we were seeking to get passed. But by me being there and being sort of a present force and working in conjunction with other visual artist groups, we were able to really begin to make headway and to influence the Senate and the House to recognize the value of the work that we were doing and to recognize the value of creators as a part of the American culture and economics and even politics, and that we deserved a certain amount of attention and respect as a result. And my favorite part was just really expressing the concerns of photographers and, in a sense, framing it largely, but then bringing it down to specific instances that would make clear why the support that we were asking for was both necessary and reasonable. And it would be an opportunity for these legislators to do the right thing by supporting us in the positions that we were taking.
I think that's absolutely true, and something that that I think you and I have talked about, and I share, especially as I start making more and more of these trips as you did to Washington, and speaking with staff and others who, when they finally hear about the concerns that the membership has, the concerns that things like AI bring into the lives of our members and everyone who creates visual works, they sit back and you realize they never really thought about that aspect, the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of photographers and creators out there that are simply trying to create, live their lives, do what they do well, and be able to make a living at it. And that, these lawmakers have the power to change things that can be beneficial for the whole creative community. And that's something that's incredibly rewarding. I know that you worked on a number of different advocacy efforts, but we're about to invite out Keith Cooperschmidt from the Copyright Alliance, and so Keith, feel free to come on out while I talk about you a little bit. Keith is an exceptional person who I've had the pleasure to get to know, and I was able to follow in Tom Kennedy's footsteps by having a seat on the Copyright Alliance board for a few years. And the Copyright Alliance is the industry voice for creators on copyright issues. The Copyright Alliance has been a partner with ASMP for a very long time and a very close partner, certainly in the time since Tom Kennedy was the executive director. And I will say this is, I had the opportunity to talk with a familiar name and a familiar face for many of you, Mike Clipper, a couple days ago. And Mike was ASMP's lobbyist for many, many years. Mike was even on staff of some of the legislatures at the time that the Copyright Act of 1976 was being written and passed. And so really, there might be no one who's more intimately knowledgeable about the Copyright Act than Mike Clipper. Unfortunately, Mike couldn't be here with us today, but he sends his best. And I know Tom and Keith, and Keith, I'm just going to jump in and welcome to you. I know that you and Tom and Mike worked on so many different projects, but the one I think we want to talk about tonight is the CASE Act. So Keith, welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. And maybe here at the start, you can talk a little bit about the Copyright Alliance and a little bit of its history with ASMP.
Yeah, sure. First of all, happy to be here. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to participate in this. I would not miss it for the world. And congratulations on 80 years. That is a very, very long time, needless to say. So the Copyright Alliance has not been around not nearly as long, right? I mean, we've been around for about 18 years. I have been at the Copyright Alliance for about 10 years now. And what the Copyright Alliance is an organization that represents all sorts of different copyright interests, whether it's movies or music, photographs, of course, video games, newspapers, magazines, even groups that you might not think about when you think about copyright, like the National Association of Realtors with their MLS database, or model codes, electrical codes and building codes and things like that. Those are all protected by copyright. And so my job is to bring all those groups together and get them all on the same page, moving in the same direction. In terms of legislation or other policy issues, maybe it's court cases, maybe it's just other policies like reports or let's say issues going on at the U.S. Copyright Office. And so ultimately that's my job, is to corral all those individuals and get them moving in the same direction. But the other job I have is to make sure that everyone, no matter how big or how small, or no matter in terms of our membership, has the exact same information, right? I mean, as I said, we do represent big record labels and big movie studios. They probably, frankly, don't need the Copyright Alliance all that much. They have teams of people out there. But we have a lot of smaller members who don't have those resources. And so for us, making sure that those groups really have the same information as those larger groups is very significant. And obviously, we're limited to copyright. We're the Copyright Alliance, so we only focus on copyright. But still, I think that's certainly a significant part of what I think our job is and what the Copyright Alliance is about, certainly.
Well, and I think this is the perfect time to say that, first, you do not have to be an organization like ASMP or a giant record label to join the Copyright Alliance, and they have creator memberships as well. And every single person here, and we recommend this to all ASMP members, should go and be part of the Copyright Alliance. You can go to copyrightalliance.org and sign up for one of those creator memberships. And I want to go back to something you just said a second ago, Keith, which is one of the things that has been so rewarding, because you did talk about the major movie studios and record labels and these giant organizations, these giant multimedia conglomerates that are members of Copyright Alliance. But there's also a seat on the board for organizations like ASMP, right? And organizations that represent the small creators. And you kind of glossed over how tricky it is to juggle that, but that is a juggling act. And sometimes, and I dare say, maybe more times than not, the interest of the individual creator may not be aligned with those large organizations, but yet you still manage to keep the Copyright Alliance on a track that benefits all of these groups. I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You mentioned juggling, right? So I guess when you first start to learn to juggle, you're dropping balls all over the place, and so it was a learning experience for me. I had to learn how to, kind of where everyone was coming from, what their interests were. But just like any juggling act, after a while, hopefully, you get better at it, right? And you're able to juggle after a while. For me, the real challenge, I mean, I thought I kind of had it under control. I know where everyone's coming from, and we had some real victories. I know we'll talk about the Case Act and some other legislation that was out there. Certainly, we had some big victories there. And so I thought, okay, I got this down. I know how to juggle. And then it's like someone threw three or four more balls at me and expected me to juggle because artificial intelligence came along, and that really challenged our membership like nothing I've seen before. And it took us a while to really grasp kind of the existential challenge that is artificial intelligence to our membership, and figure out why we were hearing things a little bit differently, let's say from authors as opposed to music publishers or something like that, and realize that, well, wait a minute, these models work differently, the law applies to them differently, they have different business models themselves. And so it took us a little while, but I think right now we're certainly at a stage where we are able to kind of corral everyone together. For me, I think certainly the most rewarding part is the wins, right? Because I work hard on this stuff. My staff works very hard, and my members do. And so when we can have a big win, I mean, that's just a terrific feeling because it's hard. It's hard to win on, have these victories on Capitol Hill. And so I know, like I said, we'll talk about the Case Act, but oh my gosh, that was a terrific feeling when when we were able to get that through. You just spend so much time on these things. I mean, it's just your life basically for many years, and to see it finally get through is just so rewarding, and also, just seeing the success of our members, and how they've been able to benefit from the Copyright Alliance's information and support over the years, is also tremendously gratifying. So, I mean, I've absolutely loved working at the Copyright Alliance for the last 10 years. I think it just celebrated my 10-year anniversary. My chairman of the board said, "Well, here's to another 10 years." I said, "Well, not so fast." And I do want some kind of retirement. So, but I really do love it, and I've been very, very fortunate to work with great members like both of the Toms here, right? Have been fantastic, and so to work with both on the board, but also as as members, trying to kind of, like I said, row in the same direction.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Keith. And yeah, so Tom, you know, uh, for so many of our members who have kept an eye on our advocacy efforts, probably the largest undertaking that ASMP has entered into in the past decade was about the Case Act, and there's a lot of information on our website, of course, but the Case Act resulted in the Copyright Claims Board, which is the new tribunal that exists that allows copyright disputes to be resolved in outside of federal court and in a way that has dedicated copyright experts taking a look at it, and is an alternative in some of the smaller cases. But that all came out of this thing called the Case Act. And Tom, I know you were up on Capitol Hill with Keith and with many others, NPPA and PPA and everyone, working on this for many years. Can you tell us what you remember about the Case Act and about kind of the genesis of that and where ASMP fit into it?
Sure. I came in as executive director, and I think at that point we'd probably been working at least 5 years on framing sort of the outlines of what the Case Act could be. And Keith and the Copyright Alliance were instrumental. And as I work with Mike Clipper and Keith in the early days of my tenure on it, we continued to refine what we thought would be the outlines of a legislation that could make a difference and be acceptable not only to the creative community, but also to the big players that Keith alluded to on our side in the copyright community, but also trying to get legislators invested in hearing us out and working with us. And one of the things that really struck me, and I know Keith would agree with this, I'm sure, is that you cannot make assumptions about who may be your allies and who may be opposing you at any point in the legislative process. And I think it really requires a certain adroitness, shall we say, or alacrity, but also, just an open-mindedness about, being genuine and representing, the truth of your experience as completely and as openly as possible, with the idea that you never know who might, in particular, that surprised me during the process was the having conversations with staff and Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, who on many issues you might not think of him, in a particular way, but he was really very good for us in the Senate, and and he was interested in, I think, primarily from the standpoint of music creators in Louisiana, which of course it's a hotbed of jazz and other forms of music. But he was very respectful about the photographic industry and understanding our perspective on it. And I really found his staff to be very open and very valuable. And on the same side, just to give you sort of a breadth of who we were dealing with, on the House side, Hakeem Jeffries was central to our efforts as a legislator. And I recall very vividly bringing him to an exhibit in New York that we were opening with at one point as part of an overall exposition in Dumbo in Brooklyn, right on the waterfront, and walking him through our exhibition, which included photographs from the Charlottesville events of 2017, and remembering him really pausing and really studying those photographs for a particular period of time. And I realized in that moment that his investment in our concerns was going to be very strengthened by his exposure to that exhibition. And so it was having some of these kinds of experiences and walking the hallways endlessly with Keith, was a big part of it. And I can't say enough in terms of my gratitude to Keith for his work helping us shepherd the CASE Act. I think he was instrumental in getting it over the finish line, and I will forever be very grateful to you, Keith, for that.
Well, Keith, let me just ask you, and I'm not sure I've ever asked you this directly, but based on what Tom was just saying, we were just talking about these large members of the Copyright Alliance, and yet, when we talk about the CASE Act, that is a bill for the smallest creators. That is a bill for the ASMPs of the world, and so that I think that even heightens the impact that the Copyright Alliance had. Why was the Copyright Alliance so interested in the CASE Act from the beginning, and what was the genesis of it from your point of view?
Yeah, so like I said, I started about 10 years ago, and I remember it was a learning curve here, right? And when you take over a new job, I think, Tom Maddrey, you get that, right? I mean, so there's a learning curve, and I remember looking at kind of the lay of the land and seeing that, okay, wait a minute, we got this. It wasn't called the CASE Act back then. I'm trying to remember what it might have been called, but we've got this issue trying to create a small claims court to help, individual and small creators and copyright owners. Why aren't we doing something? Why aren't we doing more? The Copyright Alliance should be taking the lead on that. And so I kind of came up with a list of things that I wanted to move forward on. And I remember bringing everyone I can picture this in my head, bringing everyone together for this first meeting. I think maybe I had been there a few months or something at that point, and bringing everyone together at this conference table. And the first thing I needed to do, we talked before about kind of corralling all my members and getting everyone on the same page. Well, that's the first thing, right? Because there were things that were in the original legislation that we had members that were concerned about and didn't want in, or didn't want in the way that they were in. So my job was to bring everyone together and figure out, okay, how can we change this? How can we tweak this to get everyone so we don't have like one group of Copyright Alliance members opposing a bill that others support, right? Let's make sure when we go to the Capitol, we are unified, right? And that's what the Copyright Alliance is about, is getting everyone unified. I will say that this legislative push started well before my time. I mean, there was a Copyright Office report where they suggested it and recommended some legislation, which largely the Case Act is based on, with some tweaks over the years. Intellectual property legislation tends to take 7 to 8 years to pass or so. The Case Act, I think, was about 15
Yeah.
or so. It was a long time. So it started before my time. But so I came on board, and I remember especially some of the photography organizations, and in particular ASMP, being very active, very sort of forthcoming and willing to go like talk strategy and talk substance and everything, to get us to a point where we could check the first box, which is getting all the copyright owners on board. And then the next step was, okay, how are we going to do battle with those people who just frankly hate copyright, right? There's nothing that they will like. And the real challenge has been, I mean, look, a lot of the legislation I work on, I do have the backing of movie studios and record labels and video game companies and things like who are up with their resources up on Capitol Hill. We did not have that. The reason we got the Case Act eventually passed is because of the folks that are on the Zoom and many others who aren't, sending letters, sending emails, making phone calls. And that wouldn't have been possible, of course, if groups like ASMP do not reach out to their membership and say, hey, look, we need you guys. I've kind of long since forgotten the thousands of emails and letters that were sent, but it was overwhelming. It was just like in the hundreds of thousands in terms of what was sent. And it just hasn't happened before and hasn't happened after in terms of the Copyright Alliance. So this was an amazing push. And I, for one, am extremely proud that we were able to get that done and get that enacted. It's very significant legislation, number one. But number two, it shows like, hey, look, the little guys can push that boulder up the hill too, and get legislation passed. And that's exactly what happened here. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of obstacles along the way, which we can certainly talk about. But at the end of the day, we got it passed. Even after we got it passed, there was tons of criticism about it. But really, that criticism has died down because the things we had been saying about how the CCB would work and how effective it would be and things like that have proven to come true. And our critics basically have been proven to be wrong. And you don't want to take my word for this. There's a bunch of blogs on this and other articles about this. And that's not to say that there aren't things at the CCB that couldn't stand to be fixed. And also with the government shutdown and other things going on, it's sort of in this weird place right now where no cases are moving. But it's really a huge achievement for everyone who was involved, and certainly ASMP was right up at the top of that list.
Well, thank you, Keith, and certainly thank you, Tom, for all the work you did on that, because I got to come in right at the tail end, right when things were moving across the finish line, and I remember very vividly when the Case Act finally did pass. And my recollection, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that was not a foregone conclusion, and it kind of came as a bit of a surprise, certainly to me. Even having been read in on a lot of this, what can you tell us about those last few days?
So I'm going to go back a little bit first,
Please.
And I'm going to tell a story that not too many people know here, right? Tom Kennedy, you probably remember this, but our biggest opponent in terms of the Senate, like we flew. I don't say we flew to the House. That makes it sound easy, but we just overwhelming. Even Representative Lofgren from California, who routinely opposes copyright bills one after another and after, she even supported the Case Act after we were all done with this. The vote was tremendous. We had a great vote coming out of the House. I remember being a nervous Nelly watching on TV from our conference room there as the votes came in, and then after a while realizing, oh, all right, we're doing pretty well here. But in the Senate, anyone, any senator can put a hold on the bill, and then you're dead. You're dead in the water. And there's a senator, Senator Wyden from Oregon, who is not a fan of intellectual property at all, predominantly because he's got a lot of tech companies who have server farms in his state and things like that. But I won't go down that path. But Senator Wyden was opposing the Case Act just like he was opposing, frankly, just about every other intellectual property bill. But we were able to get past that. But here's a story that not many people know. We had been engaging in negotiations with Senator Wyden. And it wasn't us in particular, but it was Senator Wyden and his staff and Senator Durbin from Illinois, who's really hugely supportive, and their staff was fantastic. And on the other side, and they had bumps along the way, but we're kind of negotiating like how to tweak the bill to make it acceptable so Wyden would remove his hold. Now, here's the interesting part. Remember, we're in the middle of COVID at this point, okay? And they changed the rules so Congress could be in session. So, typically staff, or at least one staff member, can join a senator on the floor of the Capitol and for things like that. But during COVID, that wasn't allowed. It was just the senators. And so there was a deal between Wyden and Durbin, and we knew what the deal was, and we were like, okay, we're going to get the bill passed. I think this was back in September of that year. And then something happened. I think it was Durbin, maybe it was Kennedy. I'm trying to remember who it was, but the two senators got together on the Senate floor, and Senator Wyden said something about, well, I need something else or whatever. And then it was like, wait a minute, we had a deal, and went back and forth. And they, frankly, from what I hear, started screaming at one another or whatever, and the deal fell apart, right? And the staff that we were working with would just call us and was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. If I was there, if I could be on the floor, we could have, avoided this and everything. And staff could have talked to staff because they knew a little bit better of the details. But so here we are. We thought we had a deal. We thought we had a path forward. And then all of a sudden, it all fell apart. And I can tell you that was not a fun day. And we were trying to figure out, okay, now what do we do? Senator Wyden's got a hold on this bill. And we thought it was all over. But as I think history will show, what happened was they took the bill, put it in an omnibus funding bill at the end of the year. And it did not include any of Wyden's tweaks. It was exactly the bill that we wanted as opposed to changes that he wanted. So he kind of got burned by this. And it was included and it was passed. And some people will criticize the bill and say, okay, there were no hearings on the bill, or it didn't go through proper order because it went through this omnibus funding bill. That is a bunch of bullpucky. That's the word I'll use, I guess, rather than something a little bit worse. But it was because it did. If you look back at history, there were lots of hearings on this. There were discussions, negotiations, a whole bunch of things. And then we thought we were out of the woods. Okay, we got passed by the House, passed by the Senate. And then President Trump, he was president, this is his first term, he says there's all this stuff in the news about how he's not going to sign the omnibus funding bill. He's not going to sign it. And so we thought, okay, we got past the hard part, but then we really, really sweated it out until the 11th hour to make sure that he, in fact, would sign it. And then he did, and it became law. And we went through about 18 months of working with the Copyright Office to try to figure out how to implement it and what have you. So,
I mean, Tom, how did you feel, seeing the Case Act actually get across the finish line, the thing that you had inherited, 5 years previous, it was being worked on before you even got to ASMP?
Well, I felt good. Just put it simply, I felt great. But Keith alluded to that moment that, just described that moment that was so pivotal in a sense, and it's indicative of any step along the way, those things can emerge and could blow you up completely, and you'd be dead, and you'd never regain the traction. So it was, it was just a real effort of putting one step in front of another and constantly working to make sure that people understood where we were coming from, and that the details that we were asking for were reasonable and would make a positive difference. So I felt great pride and relief when it passed and was finally signed into law by President Trump. And I felt like when I look back at it, that was probably the high point of my tenure as executive director, was getting that done, and with Keith's help and others, getting it across the finish line. I really felt like it was, when I first encountered the possibility of it as a piece of legislation, I knew the magnitude of what difference it could make in the lives of creators. And I just, I put my all into it to try to get it done.
Well, we're incredibly appreciative of it, and I got to see that firsthand, Tom, how much effort you put in, and Keith, you and the Copyright Alliance, and so many of the other photo associations. And before we wrap up, and Keith, I really do appreciate you being here tonight and talking with us. I want to touch on a topic that as you mentioned, has been dominating everything when it comes to the world of copyright, and that's AI. And as we mentioned, next week we'll be having a conversation with Santiago Leon from the Copyright Authenticity Initiative. Really seeing about AI in photography. But I wanted to touch on one point which Tom raised. And that is, you really don't know who are going to be your allies, before you start this. And we've seen some very, very diverse, from the point of the political spectrum, voices on AI. In a webinar I gave a month or two ago, we played a clip of some questions Josh Hawley had for the AI companies that were almost verbatim what we might say from the small creator perspective. I mean, Keith, there's so much that's up in the air right now with AI, and we're starting to see the first court cases come down. But what are your high level takeaways from where we're at in 2025 on this when it comes to groups like ASMP?
You mean in terms of AI specifically?
Yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, look, this is we're really up against it. Because the AI companies, the Metas, the Googles, Anthropics, you name it, OpenAI, they are spending billions and billions of dollars on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. If they would only take that money and pay creators a small portion of it, and pay creators for using their works instead of stealing it, we wouldn't have any issues, right?
yeah,
And so our biggest challenge, and I think we have the public behind us. I think the public is very supportive here. I think many members of Congress are very supportive too here, but it's a challenge. It is a challenge every day to make sure, frankly, it's like something bad doesn't happen, right? In other words, to make sure that creators and copyright owners can continue to get compensated for their hard work and their creativity, and that they will ask permission. And through licensing, license their works to AI companies. But right now, these are frankly like big bullies, and they're basically saying we can take your stuff for free, and if you don't like it, sue us. And that's why there are almost 60 lawsuits now in court, and a lot of them are text-based, as opposed to the visual arts and photography. But there's certainly enough, like especially in these couple cases involving Getty, that involve photography directly. But it's a challenge. It is a challenge. I mean, we've been doing this for about 3 years now, and we've been knock on wood, we've been able to hold the line. Like there is no all-out exception in the copyright law that allows these AI companies to do what they're doing, which is to copy works for training purposes. We're doing our best to make sure that doesn't happen. There's no executive order coming out of the White House that would do something similar. The Department of Justice has yet to file a brief in any of these cases. All of this is potential. It's like I just heard today that the DOJ might be filing briefs in some cases next year in 2026. So we're gonna have to push back against that again too. And it's this constant, push and pull. But we do have the occasional victory here. And the important thing is, if for those listening, if you hear on the news or read articles or hear something on the news about these cases, the important thing to know is there are almost 60 cases pending. There are 2 cases decided, 3 depending on if you include this one that's in Delaware. And and out of 60, I can't do math that quickly, but what is that, like 3% or something of all the cases? And so, and in one of those cases, it was Anthropic ended up paying damages of $1.5 billion. And so the copyright owners who were involved in those, the creators, the authors who were involved in that case, are going to end up getting about $3,000 each. Now, that may not sound like a lot, perhaps. I should say 3,000 per work, because if they have more than one work, they'll get more money. It may or may not sound like a lot, but that's a big, big, big victory. In the music space, it was a huge, you may have seen the news with the agreement between UMG and Udio. That is huge because that settlement agreement requires copyright owners to opt in. In other words, they have to say, yes, you can use my work in order for the AI company to use the work. And they're going to be totally licensed going forward. So, we've just been some, like I said, up and down, kind of the pendulum swings back and forth. We get good news and bad news, but so far we've been able to hold the line. But it's important that groups like ASMP and most important ASMP members kind of stay in touch with what's going on here and be ready to jump in and let their members of Congress know, or people in the executive branch know of any concerns that they might have.
Well, Keith, thank you. And I just put into the chat a link to the 80th anniversary we did a few weeks ago, where it was a legal talk that I did on AI and some of those recent cases in a little more detail that Keith is alluding to. So please go take a look at that. Keith, before we let you go, once again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. Any final thoughts you have here on ASMP's 80th anniversary?
Yeah, just sending along a congratulations, and once again thanking you for letting me participate in it, and frankly for being so supportive of the years and being such a fantastic member. I love all my members, but you guys are at the very top of the list because you're just so supportive and so helpful. And when I say that, I'm also talking about the ASMP members who've just been terrific over the years. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Keith. I hope you have a great evening and a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon, probably next week, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Keith.
Bye.
Bye now. Well, so, I think, Tom, that was a perfect representation of, just a few of the ways that ASMP has been able to work on the advocacy front. Not only the work that you did with Keith and the CASE Act, and even before that, things like Orphan Works, and we have some things coming up that we've been very invested in from ASMP's perspective. We are focused right now on AI in a number of different forms. And we're also focused on copyright modernization, making sure that the systems that exist now, the function that our members need to protect their copyrights, are made as simple as possible and as straightforward as possible. And I think every single person who files a copyright will tell you they are not. They are not that way right now, and we want to make them that way. So one of our next big advocacy and legislative pushes that we're right in the middle of right now is dealing with copyright modernization. I will be up in DC here in about 10 days for 3 days on the Hill, following in Tom Kennedy's footsteps and having these meetings where we are taking it to the next front in this battle, and that is copyright modernization. Tom, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I was so excited for us to be able to get back together on Zoom and just talk. And I want to give you the floor for a minute. If anything you'd like to wrap up with as we look back at not only the archives but the advocacy work, the time you spent as executive director, anything you'd like to wrap up with.
Well, there's a couple of things. I guess the first one is recognizing the value of membership and being part of a community. I think being a creator is often lonely work. You're sort of out there on your own island trying to prove the value of what you're producing and satisfying the needs of clients who are coming at you from a million different directions. And it can be really challenging mentally and emotionally to be in that space. And I think that one of the values of community is it makes you feel that you're not alone and that you've got people you can turn to as allies who understand what you're going through, and they can be supportive in terms of providing information that might make a difference at a particular point in time. I think that's always been one of the things that I felt underpinned the organization. I mean, Grayson sort of alluded to it and described it directly by showing some of the connections that existed among some of the great members who are hailed as the greatest photographers of all time, and how they interacted with each other over time to build the organization. I think the other thing that's really critical is that ASMP has an important role to play in promoting media literacy in an age where we're increasingly subjected to misinformation and disinformation. And I think that there's a lot of potential, perhaps good, that could come out of AI, but there's also a lot of potential danger in it, is the way I see it. And I think that for ASMP to be involved creating the guardrails that will help people in their individual media literacy understand where imagery is coming from, what its purpose is, and how it's being utilized, and how it's even being created and produced in the first place, a kind of what I would call radical transparency. I think all of that's going to be essential going forward. And I think ASMP is uniquely positioned, drawing on the wisdom and expertise of the crowd, so to speak, by our ASMP members, to really be in the forefront of that effort. And I would hope that, that's something that, over the next 2 decades, so as we approach our 100th, we can look back and say that we played a profound role in helping the industry continue to evolve in a way that benefits the individual creators so they continue to do what they love.
I think that's a perfect place to end. One thing that became so apparent from the first time I started working with Tom and seeing the work that ASMP did on the advocacy side is that I can't think of another organization that punches so far above its weight class when it comes to advocacy, whether that's on the legal side, the judicial side, or the legislative side. We are lucky to have members, and we are lucky to have a structure and an organization that's 80 years old that has fought for the rights of photographers and creators. And that's something that I know Tom took on his shoulders when he was executive director, and I do also feel that responsibility to get out there and speak for each one of our members. So, Tom, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who watched on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook or here in the webinar room. Remember that next week we have a talk with Santiago Leon on Wednesday. And right now, as we end, there are literally in existence only 3 of these. And these are 80th anniversary Yeti mugs, which are not being sold. You can only win it through a giveaway. And I'm about to give it away right now. And so I hope you went to that QR code earlier. And I am going to draw a winner right now for this unique, literally one of 3 item that we have here. And so we will end by saying congratulations to David Kay from Frisco, Colorado, who has won an 80th anniversary Yeti Cup in the brightest orange you've ever seen. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Tom. And get those entries in on giveaways. Come see us on December 5th if you're in the New York area. But most of all, thank you for being a member. We're so happy to have you. Tom, I hope you have a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend, and we're going to talk again soon.
Thanks a lot for letting me participate tonight, Tom. It's been a real pleasure, and it's great to be with everybody once again. Great to see you all.
Have a good night, everyone.